welcome back again. If my timeline is correct, you guys have just had Christmas and New Year and all that kind of thing. Whereas I'm recording this beforehand because this is the magic world of like TV and videos where things don't have to happen at the right time. So hopefully you had a great time and hopefully you've enjoyed some of the content we have inundated you with over the last couple of weeks with the tail end of Shillelagh and a couple of extra little bits as well. So we're here into the new year and we're moving on to look at something a little different, something we haven't done a video on before. So we're going to be moving away from our Bartitsu syllabus, which we're looking at with Shillelagh, even though I am wearing Bartitsu t-shirt today, and moving back to looking at side sword. So we've looked at side sword before, we've looked at side sword, and we've looked at side sword and dagger. Normally, the way I would train this is I would train people with side sword, and then offhand side sword, then side sword and dagger. And then the next thing I would teach them is moving to this lovely piece of kit, which is the buckler. So we're going to spend the next few weeks looking at the side sword and buckler as a weapon combination. Now, obviously, very clearly, it's a shield rather than a second blade, so it's going to be very different to what we've looked at in terms of dagger, and hopefully you'll find that really quite interesting. Now, buckler, when we start seeing bucklers and we go back to Fetch 1 or I-33, whatever you want to call it, when you're dealing with an arming sword, this is predominantly used to cover the hand a lot of the time to provide extra protection to stop the hand being sniped. However, by the time we've moved to side sword, although doesn't look like a lot, the amount of protection I have for my hand has gone up quite considerably. So I will occasionally use it for this kind of covering motion, but a lot of the time I'm going to use it very differently. And the way that we're going to use this with the Italian material, in particular, we're moving to Manciolino for this. Predominantly we teach from Dall'Agocchie. Dall'Agocchie doesn't cover buckler, so I can't use his buckler, so we'll switch over to Manciolino. Why Manciolino? Because I find him easier to deal with than Moroso, basically. Everybody does Moroso, and I'm not a huge fan. So this is what we're doing instead. So what we're going to do is we're going to use this as a shield. Now, if I use this like some kind of targe or kite shield or something, you can see how small an area of my body it actually protects. So instead, what we're going to do is, rather than holding it close to the body like this, we're going to push it all the way forward. And you'll notice, as I push it forward, more and more of me disappears behind that buckler. So actually, just by using the wonderful powers of geometry, I can make this seem much bigger than it actually is. And if I hold it out here, when somebody comes to attack, and it stops here, you can see that due to that continued property of geometry, I'm actually creating an even bigger space than is covered by the shield itself. So that's the first rule of sword and buckler, side sword and buckler. The arm stays out straight at shoulder height, literally in front of your off shoulder, unless you have a good reason to move it. The other thing I'm going to say at this point is, a lot of people have a tendency to hold, I'm going to come closer so you can see what I'm talking about, to hold it at kind of this 90 degrees, so it's directly opposite my hand. Now the problem we have with that is, I want some change when I turn my hand over, and as you can see, there's absolutely none there. So what I'm going to do is, rather than as it is here, I'm just going to twist it to about 45 degrees. Now from the front, you'll not see a vast amount of difference most of the time, but now when I turn my hand over, it changes things. It opens up this side of my arm. Yeah? So I'm going to have it at that slight angle. It's also going to help me when we come to looking at punching with the shield, which is going to be a very small thing later on. So that's going to be how we're going to hold it. I'm going to cover why we might want this side to be uncoverable later on, but for now, I just want you to understand we're going to hold it at that 45 degrees and in that angle, and if we adopt what we would consider quite a classical stance, if I go for Codalunga Alta, with the buckler, that would be a relatively acceptable stance for side sword and buckler. And you can see I'm quite well protected there. Really, it's only this knee and my head that are open as targets. I'm not really going to go into it a lot more by this point, but we're going to pick up on this next week and we're going to start looking at some of the guards and things we're going to be using as we go through buckler. But really, this was just a bit of an introduction on how you hold the thing and what it is, and hopefully you're going to find the rest of this series interesting as we go through it. So I shall catch you next week and we shall start looking at guards. Until then, have a great week.